as a startup franchisor, as an emerging franchisor, everything you're building, the value of your franchise system rests around your franchisees. Your long-term enterprise value is a function of your royalty EBITDA, which is a function of your franchisee success, their sales, their profitability, how well they're selling in their local marketing. So how do you supercharge local marketing, franchisee marketing, and utilize your brand development fund? I'd like to welcome Jay Gorman. Jay is the founder of yorCMO, and what's really interesting is that yorCMO is a fractional outsourced chief marketing officer program, outsourced CMOs. But Jay's also a franchisor. yorCMO is a franchise system. So Jay has a unique perspective, both as a franchisor and as a marketing professional that supports franchisors, helps them with their strategy, deployment of brand development funds, and local marketing. So welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Charles, for having me this morning.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we're doing this. We've had so many good conversations, just private ones where we're talking about local marketing, and for you guys as a marketing company, so to speak, we've had private conversations where you've said, Charles, hey, we've come into franchise systems, we've helped franchise brands recalibrate their marketing, reassess their marketing platform and their positioning. And what really captured my attention is the focus on coaching franchisors to really help franchisees succeed at the local marketing level. And, when we speak to startup franchisors, everything, their whole future is based on franchisee validation, franchisee unit level economics. And I feel like, startup franchisors could use a boost or support, or at least focus and game plan for local marketing, brand development fund. And so, Jay, I'm looking forward to just having this conversation.
Yeah, it'll be great. I'm looking forward to it.
So where do we start, Jay? When, both you as a franchisor and when you're working with franchise brands, if we're setting up the roadmap of assets or things you're evaluating, where do you start?
We always start, and it may sound odd, but we start with the end customer in mind. We want to know what's going to drive that customer into a franchise business. We've worked with franchisors where we've done surveys of their customers and found that the way they explain their business and what they offer is counter to what their best customers truly want. And so if you can make sure that the offering at the franchise level and how they communicate that to the customer is in line with the customer's needs, that's the absolute most critical first step. And we've seen that where it's off track. And if you fix your brand messaging, could be your pricing, could be your slightly tweak to your offering. That's an incredible place to start.
So I think it's very hard for a business leadership team, founder, to see their blind spots, right? And so everyone has a difficult time assessing and evaluating their own business. So 99% of the time, we all think the messaging and the values we're focused on is being received by the customers. So how do you even get to see that blind spot? Like, what would be some, at least, indicators to say, wait a minute, something may be off track with our brand alignment?
Sure. Yeah, because most times the brand is the vision and the history of the franchisor, who started typically with a unit or two and then grew from there. So they've obviously had success, but as you grow nationally, things change. And there's two tools that we use. The first tool we use is direct buyer interviews. And we ask, what triggered the need for this, product, this offering? And so we understand what the needs and how those are formulated. We then really understand, how do they make a buying decision? Where do they find information? If it's kind of a researched type product, then where are they getting their information? What criteria do they use to compare their options? And we do these buyer interviews. We will get with people, and speak to 5 to 10 and get a baseline. And then we will send a survey out with that type of information and more, because then you can get mass quantities of surveys back. And again, we have learned in many cases, franchisors and even franchisees thought certain things were most important to their customer. And the reality is they weren't. Other things were more important. And so you're able to, in most cases, make simple adjustments to messaging, offering, and things like that, and make a difference.
As you're giving this advice, I'm like reflecting, and things are spinning through my head about customer experience and journey. And it's always interesting when I have conversations when there is a misalignment. Like, I think something's really important, and I find out they really focused on something else. So I think what's interesting about this is so many businesses never do this, myself included, right? So we just keep going along with these assumptions. So direct buyer interviews, evaluating how they're making a buying decision,
right?
Which to me is probably such powerful information when you get it. So let me understand the experience. You're working with a brand, and you tell them, hey, this is going to be our first step.
Right.
Are they receptive to that right away? And
they are. We have a full process that's just one part of it. We do internal interviews with both franchisees, franchisor, key stakeholders. We evaluate all their marketing that they're currently doing, both at the brand level and at the unit level. So we're looking at a comprehensive picture. But early on in that process is the buyer interviews, and they are receptive. We have stunned several with information they were not expecting, and but then they are receptive because they want to grow, and they want to put their franchisees in the best position possible to grow, and so they're usually in pretty good spirit about it.
Jay, not to get into anything private or particular as to a brand, but would you be able to share like an example of the surprise when you go through this process and like, we believed A and we find out it's Z?
Yeah, one example without giving away kind of the secrets of the company. We went and asked we provided a list of criteria to a client when making a decision about using that business. And we said, these are the things. And they picked 3 topics that were dramatic, that were important to the business. They knew that was important, but it was not what they messaged. It's not what they led with in their communication. Operationally, they lived it, but not from a marketing standpoint. And they led with a kind of a grand idea in their marketing that we're this and we're all this to you. And the reality was, on a list of like 13 or 14 items, it was like 9th or 10th. And they really were surprised, but receptive to make the adjustments from a marketing perspective because they already lived it operationally.
Well, and what I like about this is it's there. Like it's making this assessment is a very actionable item. And one of the frustrations I see for emerging brands, and I experience, is so many of them don't have the right brand positioning.
Right.
And so the brand positioning, messaging, and then you're deploying dollars into lead gen. And then you're misdiagnosing the problems, right? You're misdiagnosing maybe the marketing channel is not effective, but it's the messaging.
Right.
And then I think a lot of generic agencies, right, that just want to feed an emerging brand just enough based on a dollar value,
right,
leads to this cycle where they don't gain traction. So to me, like it's so smart to focus on. And in fact, Jay, I mean, after this, I'm going to ask you about like helping us a little because
sure.
I think I have so many assumptions. All right. So we start off with a brand assessment, direct buyer interviews, how they're making a buying decision. Again, we're talking milestone, just foundational items, right? I know there's a lot more involved.
Sure.
So now you reassess this data. What's another now again, because we're talking about franchisee local marketing ultimately, right?
Correct. Correct.
What's the next major milestone you're focused on?
We typically see with our franchisors and emerging franchisors that the grand opening and getting the franchisee to profitability as fast as possible is critical. And in many cases, they struggle with that grand opening plan. There's kind of some, give and take on, well, how much do I need to spend up front to really get myself up to critical mass quickly? And what are the right things? How early do you start? We typically see franchisees and the franchisor grand opening plan start too late. If you just open your business, open the door and say, we're here, and there's crickets, that's not good for profitability. And so what are the things you can do to get people start very quickly, moving them to profitability as fast as possible?
It's such an important statement, right? The advice you're giving,
Mm-hmm.
which even at the most basic level, right? Which I think it's, the primary goal is getting that franchisee to profitability as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
And your advice, and I agree, and I'm going to try to connect it with the FDD a little too, but I agree that a lot of times the marketing is not early enough.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I see often, and when we're working with our clients, is say item 7, estimated initial investment. And a lot of franchisors will have an initial marketing plan or grand opening marketing, and almost feels like an afterthought. Like,
right. Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes like they'll not undercut the numbers, but focus on the lower numbers.
They will.
Yeah. And so that gets your estimate lower. But I think you're missing the bigger opportunity, which is, hey, what about a 6-month block of marketing that starts 2 months at least prior to opening, and we have a good runway? So if you develop an ideal, say we're in a retail-based business, or let's talk about both, a retail brick and mortar and a service-based business in a territory, what for you would be the right strategy, pre-opening marketing, when it should start? What should franchisors focus on? Should we look at a 6-month block? Should we be taking the dollars and spending it? And what's your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I would do is flip the item 7 on its head. And, you're the legal expert, so I don't want to break the rules, but what I would do is definitely make sure you have the right number in there. We talk to people all the time where that's a struggle. But they just put a number in there and not a duration, or they don't set a certain benchmark. And so I think they need to communicate that marketing needs to be a certain percentage of sales for a certain period of time till they get to break even. And yes, the closer you get to break even, the lower it can go as a percentage of sales. So I just don't think first and foremost they model it correctly. The other issue we see, and this is one we just worked with in this past year, had nothing to do with the numbers. The numbers and the marketing budget were fine. It's when they started. They didn't start early enough because they were doing a retail build out. And they said, well, if we try to sell these, booklets of service or things of that nature, the place isn't ready. Well, if you work with their operations team and how they build these out, why can't you get the front of the house done a little sooner? So when I was in the franchise business before, we always made them, get the front set up right away, and we could have a table there and we could say pre-opening, and people would walk in and you can, pre-order, pre-sell, services and things of that nature. So you can literally start generating cash even before the business opens. And then it just gets the grand opening much faster. I also see they don't take enough of risk. When we, way back in the day, I was with Quiznos when it was a young, little, small chain, before its big national rollout. And we used to do something crazy. We would send out several thousand free sandwich cards. And people were like, oh my gosh, how could you give a whole sandwich away, right? $3-4 right there, back in the day. And the reality is we would measure how many people would buy a drink and chips. And the reality is you were pretty close to break even on the order when they bought a drink and chips. But the reality is you put several thousand people through the process very quickly to build, and then you'd give them something to come back again for that next trip. Now you got to be careful not to overemphasize discounts, but there's ways to build that habit into those users and into those customers early on. For a service business, it's most of that is it's such a different model because it's say it's carpet cleaning or things of that nature. You don't have to wait for that brick and mortar build out, right? You may be waiting for equipment and certain things, but there's no reason you should not start your marketing as early as possible. Start taking appointments. You don't want to do it so early that people are not going to book the appointment, right? But you can start that earlier because we've seen that work and grow to break even faster. There's no reason not to.
It's really helpful advice. And I want to get back to your earlier statement about flipping the item 7 and for everyone listening. So traditionally, or what you'll see in many FDDs and legal agreement structures, and I'm a big fan of what Jay is saying, and I'll explain, is that franchisors typically state that the franchisee's local marketing requirement is a set percentage of their gross sales.
Mm-hmm.
So in a very typical scenario, you'll see local marketing obligation, 2% of monthly gross sales. You have to spend 2% of your gross sales on local marketing. The problem with that is that if you have $0 in gross sales, well, then 2% of 0 is 0.
Correct.
But during your startup phase, Jay's point is you may need much more than 2% because you're ramping up sales. And on the flip side, once you hit good flow and market saturation and recognition, as your sales climb, maybe you need less than 2%.
Correct.
So I think what you're advocating is let's flip this with a sliding scale that works reverse, right? Where and I agree with that. And it's funny is years ago, how I learned or really came to appreciate that, this is many years ago, was representing a franchisor and speaking with a multi-unit franchisee. And this multi-unit franchisee of other systems is like, hey, if I hit flow at certain sales, I want to reduce my marketing because there's only so much I can do for incremental gain.
Correct.
So I think that's an important point. So if you have free reign, and again, I know we're speaking generally, what type of marketing budget or what structure would you be looking to set up for a brick and mortar or for a service-based business, say during the first year? So are we 2 months before the first year? What would be ideal for you?
Well, are you asking in terms of budget?
Well, you don't have to say actual dollars, but
sure. Yeah. So we use a methodology that gets to customer lifetime value. So there's 2 ways to look at it. We build a customer lifetime value model and say, if for you to get a customer, what are they worth over 3 years, or whatever the lifetime of that relationship should be, typically 2 to 3 years. And then based on that profitability you get from that lifetime value, what portion of that should go to acquire that customer? And so we look at it from one direction, that way. We also look at it from just a straight gross margin. So you look at the unit economics. Have people built a proper unit economic model to understand the value of a single transaction and how much you should use to acquire that? And then say, okay, well, I need to get to X number of customers over this period of time. Well, then use that dollar, that cost per acquisition, times that number of new customers you want, in order to generate that budget. So there's different ways to look at how to do that. And then the other thing people really miss is, how do you grow lifetime value? We had a client, and they great business, but their units are busy, and it's hard for them to really keep track of, oh, has so-and-so been here lately? This is not a sandwich shop where you don't know the people. There's appointments, you have emails, you have all of these things. And so we worked with them to build a sequence and a process that if this person doesn't show up in a reasonable period of time, they get an email. And there's a lot of fun. We put video and it was just a lot of great, hey, we miss you and those types of things. And it really drives lifetime value. So even over that first 6 months, don't allow you, if that customer ideally would be there once a month or several times a month, and they're not, don't wait 6 months or a year before you handle that. Do that early, because that growing that lifetime value at the same time you're growing new customer acquisition is very valuable.
And what I'm wondering is, because you're talking about unit economics, customer and lifetime value, right? And you're diving into, your Quiznos example was amazing too. So what I'm curious is, what do you see with franchisors in terms of, are they not communicating these KPIs and unit economics enough? Because I feel like that's sometimes the disconnect in the buy-in. When I see brands that really great people and founders, and they come to us, they're struggling a little with franchisee dissatisfaction. And one of the things you see along the way is that they're doing a good job as franchisor, but the franchisees, when they onboarded, had the wrong expectations.
Absolutely.
About customer acquisition, cost of acquisition. So what would you recommend? So would you be sharing with franchisees as part of your initial training, so that the unit level economics of the marketing and acquisition and things like that?
This might be a little controversial to the franchise sales guys out there, the brokers and all these folks, but what I would actually do is I would start at the very front of the franchise process, even before, right around the time they get their FDD, have them do a personality assessment. Do these people even fit? For example, we've got a client that they've got people who are really great at just getting out and building networks and community. I call it the mayor of your market. I heard somebody use that term years and years ago. And these people are amazing. And their business grew so much faster. And the other ones who just stood behind the counter and waited for people to come in or call to make an appointment were definitely slower growth. And these are two different personalities. And so if during the franchise sales process, you can hope to acquire more people who are those networking growth people, and you can at least let the people who are not that type of person be aware up front that this is critical to grow. And you either need to bring that person into your model early, or you may not be a good fit and turn them away. And that's why it's controversial. And so I think I would start that far up the process. And then when it comes to training and onboarding, if during the grand opening plan, if they have a, whatever the length of process is, 6 month, step-by-step thing they need to do. And then either the marketing team or the operations team, who are hopefully very hands-on early in their growth, are absolutely checking off if those are right. So for our franchisees, our CMOs, we have a 120-day plan. So when we launch, we do, kind of launch things. Again, we're a service business, so there's no brick and mortar, but we do, pre-launch to get them on the website and all that. We bring them in for training. We do some virtual training. We do in-person training, and we then meet with them once a week. And we have in our Microsoft Teams, each franchisee has a project plan that says you need to go meet with 5 people and share what you're doing. You need to go to 10 networking events this week. And we literally have they put the events and things they go to right in there. So each week, and we do it as a group, they can kind of hold each other, accountable to do those things that we know are more likely to get them clients sooner, and have that checklist and have that we call it, partnership. It's not really oversight, it's a real partnership with our CMOs to help grow. And that's the way I would approach it. So I threw a lot at you, but
this is very helpful, right? Personality assessment. I think that is critical, right? Because I'll always explain, you have 2 identical franchisees, both generating the same gross sales. Mm-hmm. One is going to be satisfied, one won't. Mm-hmm. And the variation could be their mindset and alignment. Also capitalization, right? Is one undercapitalized and one is
Right.
properly capitalized, right? But I do like your examples for your CMO on how you guys approach that 120-day training, that plan, which I love, right? Because the value of a franchise system is the network.
Mhm.
So on your team's meetings, if everyone is meeting up and checking those boxes and having those conversations, that's where the wins happen. We had spoken to a very successful multi-unit franchisee, young guy in the restaurant industry, and he was describing how the coaching environment of the franchisor, and he didn't want to let down his coach,
Right.
right? So that's really big what you're saying. So we have that process. Let's go into deployment a little here, right? So now we've aligned brand, we focused on brand alignment, we're focused on franchisee personality, a game plan. We flipped item 7, at least in our own minds, Jay.
Right. Right.
And now, what are some best practices, or where, again, this is about increasing franchisee unit level economics, visibility, which bouncing, I love the idea of sharing unit economics with the franchisees. But if you're deploying local dollars, brand development fund, what's your focus there?
Yeah, it really depends on the from that buyer interview, where does that customer get their information? And so for the one example is, we know for sure that this customer goes to Google, they search for this type of service, they look at reviews. Reviews are absolutely critical, and they ask their local professionals. And so there was all this noise about, we've got to have this great social and we've got to have videos and cute things and this and that. And sure, you can have that at a brand level. It's a little canned. It's not as good when you do it locally. But the reality is, the buyer wasn't making a decision based on the client's social media page. The buyer was making a decision based on, the reviews and feedback from professionals. So we basically shifted their focus, and we had franchisees who were like, no, don't shift from social media. And we said, listen, put whatever you want on social media at this point. That's fine. But let's make sure we absolutely own AdWords in your market. Let's make sure SEO, which the franchisees were pushing back, why do we have to do it? Why do we have to do it? We show them the data. That's where people find them. That's critical. And so everybody jumped on board with search engine optimization. We then really made sure to get pushed as we come out of COVID, right? Which was a kind of a distraction there, is you need to have local events with the key influencers. The key influencers will bring their people and their customers, and it's a real collaboration because everyone wins. And in their case, the more they can have events and just create a lot of fun at their location, both the customers and your referral, network of professionals, just to get to know you better, and you have a better relationship with them. And so in that case, it was radically different. Where there's another group we're working with, social media is absolutely critical. This is all about vanity and my results and look how great I am and how beautiful I am. Social media is, you got to own it. And they've got to do an amazing job at a local level to generate social media activity, because you can't do it at the corporate level because it's too canned. It's a completely different approach. So it all depends on that buyer and how they come to find you and choose to do business with you.
So Jay, it's an interesting perspective on the social. So how do you recommend like emerging franchisors handle that dichotomy between what you're saying, calling, canned corporate versus that local social presence, and how do you guide that the right way, keep them in brand standards and control it?
Well, if I had my druthers, I would just shut social media down, because it's really it is really hard to do. It is probably one of the biggest X factors in the brands right now. But our recommendation is, yes, you have, corporate content that is a little more canned, but gives you cadence on social, and at least you're putting things up there for credibility's sake. but if you can give them tools to localize it, which people are doing, where they give you the document and it can be easily localized with some parameters. And then really it goes back to this person. Is the person really want to work on their business? Are they excited about creating this type of activity? Or are they more of the, kind of low key person? And so it's about training. It's about clear standards. It's about, can you put it as much as possible in their operational process that, we've inserted it actually in certain operational processes so that, it was like back in the day when Toyota did this, right? So every time somebody bought a new Toyota, the Toyota store, the people would jump in the air and they'd take a picture of them and they literally post it all over their walls. Well, now they can do that on social media. And they did an amazing effort with that. And so if they keep it simple, make it part of the operational process and part of the checklist, you're going to have much more likely, uptick from the franchisees because they're busy. They got a business to run. It's hard for them to stop and think about all these things. I got customers to serve. I got this and this and this.
Would you recommend franchisors run the local marketing or have an agency do that and align all of the franchisees at a local level?
On digital for sure. And there's some great partners out there who understand how to do local marketing. So the AdWords, the SEO, your Google My Business, all of these critical kind of hub components of digital marketing are absolutely nailed. And that those same agencies can provide the social media kind of corporate posts and corporate information, to the franchisees to post or post on their behalf. And let the franchisees do their local things. When it comes to local marketing, you just got to give them the right toolbox, the right training, the right encouragement, because an agency, that's out in California, it's going to be very hard for them to build relationships with influencers and local media and things of that if they're out in North Carolina, right? So, but the digital and those technical marketing things absolutely use a partner.
Jay, and back to the unique nature of who you are, and I appreciate all this great advice, but it really reflects on what you're doing at yorCMO, and I know this has been an interesting journey. Generally, we're, as a founder, right, and other people out there looking to franchise their business, and maybe other people looking for the right opportunity, what's your advice generally in terms of what you've experienced and where you're going with yorCMO?
First and foremost, we don't really we don't think of ourselves as franchisors and our CMOs as franchisees. We actually don't even use the word franchisee in our business. We use CMOs, and we think of them as our partners. And we, look at their business and the number of customers they are currently serving and their pipeline, and want to make sure we work with them to help them achieve their goals. I mean, that's really our mission. Our mission was never to become a franchisor. That was just, legally the way we had to do it. We really, we have a mission to help CMOs escape the corporate world and live a better life while doing what they love to do. And this, I think that's the first thing, right? If you're going to franchise, are you doing it just because you want a system to make more money, or do you really want to help people change their lives? And if you want to really help people change their lives, or also impact local markets with the service and the value that you bring by growing, that's where you have to start. Don't do it because you think you're going to go buy a big corporate jet and fly around the world and things of that nature. That's just not. It will fall apart on you. And then the second thing is we really, and it's probably not the best thing, but we really take an ownership of helping our CMOs grow. And we have way beyond from marketing support and sales support, because we know that was the biggest challenge CMOs have. In wanting to do this on their own. They said, I want to go out on my own, but I don't know how to grow my business. And so that has to be a critical component of what we do. And that's probably a major focus area that franchisors need to really take seriously.
What I love about yorCMO, I love businesses that create efficiencies.
Mhm.
This isn't the right term, but I also love businesses that create markets, right?
Mhm.
And what I love about yorCMO is you're giving other CMOs the opportunity to build under that banner. But also the part that I love from a consumer standpoint is that you're putting this knowledge base and reach to businesses that don't normally understand the value of it and have the ability to access someone at a CMO level.
Mhm.
And I think that's, it's the little things that somehow are big innovations. I think it's a big innovation.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's being able to bring a marketing thought leader into a company, who has 20 years of experience in the industries that our customers are in, and work at a fraction of a time, but bring 100% of the knowledge and expertise, but put it to work just part time and coach and give them the approach and the strategy is a game changer, because much smaller companies, $5 million companies can actually have a CMO who's probably worked at $100 million company on their team, and that's never happened before.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and we're going to share information about yorCMO. Jay, it always like we're always looking for the pieces to the puzzle, and there's so many takeaways here that you've shared and that I appreciate. The most important, I think, or the best mindset, and reflects that you're a franchisor also, is your advice about getting franchisees to profitability as quickly as possible, because that like connects all the dots. And
mission critical.
Yeah, and I love your focus, because what we do is marketing, but the reason we're doing it is to get them to that profitability, and for the franchisor, it's getting to your point about changing lives. So, Jay,
Right.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Charles. It was great visiting with you, and look forward to chatting again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.